Hello, everyone. I hope you're keeping safe. Welcome to today's session where we shall be discussing business strategies. Visualize it, win it. Thank you for taking the time out and being here today. My name is Grace Nzula. I am a trainer and HR consultant with Tara Solutions, a training and HR consulting firm, and a manager at Panesop Training Institute, a carpentry school. Get It Right with Tara Solutions is a platform where we demystify issues to do with entrepreneurship and employment. We are in partnership with Zalego Academy, a software development and capacity building academy, and NG Support Services, a brand management and communications company. This is our 6th webinar. The first one, we looked at the legal requirements of starting a business. We also looked at brand management and communication. The second webinar, we sought to answer the question, how do I know which business to start? The third time, we had Mr. Panesta, who shared with us his journey in business for over 40 years. We then had Mr. Karundu, who discussed with us what customers want. Last week, we learned about bookkeeping and what the taxman wants. If you missed any of our webinars, kindly visit our YouTube channel, Tara Solutions, and while at it, kindly subscribe. Next week, we shall be discussing intellectual property. Just a reminder and a point to note, for those joining us for the first time today, here are some facts. 22% of businesses fail in the first year, 30% in the second year, 50% in the 5th year, 70% in the 10th year. And this is what Get It Right with the Tara Solutions is trying to change. We have to change that narrative. So I am pleased to introduce today's speaker, Mr. Joram Minamo. He's a management consultant, a coach, and a motivational speaker who is passionate about Africa and seeing its people achieve greatness. He's a team leader with Wild International, and he has countless accolades to his name that we can't exhaust. Recently, I am very pleased and honored to announce that him and his team released its 2020 SME Performance Report with insights on the overall business health of growth stage SMEs during COVID-19 period. And I think that was very, very bold of you. And I cannot wait to read further. I have just gone through. I can't wait to delve deeper on the report. We invite you to answer the question. We invite you, our audience, to ask all the possible questions you can. We will try and answer all of them. Our Q&A session, tab is open. Joram Minamo.
Yes,
Lee Goldman said, a vision without a strategy remains an illusion. Please. Tell us more.
Okay. So first of all, thank you very much, Grace Nzula, for inviting me. It is a real pleasure and honor. It's not easy for people to open their platforms for you. So I really appreciate this.
Anytime.
So my name is Jerome Minamo. I am the CEO, founder of Wild International, and also recently a company called Sandbox, SNDBX, which is a center where we operate from now. I'll be telling you more about Wild, but I call myself the chief entrepreneur on Twitter, and my social media platforms are Joram Minamo. And that's because I have spent a lot of time working with entrepreneurs, very many of them in Kenya and across the continent. And even more recently, I'm a mentor for some programs around the world, around entrepreneurship. And so today I just want to talk very briefly about strategy, and I'm going to share my screen just so that you can have some notes that you can take with you. So I can start that, okay? And another time, Grace will invite me to tell my story about how we've built our company, because that's exciting. Although there's a podcast online, if you're interested, you can get that. So Introduction to Wild. Wild is a company that was established in 2004. We actually started out as a youth consultancy, and I like mixing in my story, but ended up pivoting into corporate training, and then we added consultancy, organizational development in terms of culture and strategy. And then by around 2010, we realized that a lot of the people who needed what it is that we were offering really were entrepreneurs. So we set up a program in entrepreneurship. And so now we call ourselves an unmatched strategy and entrepreneurship consulting firm that's powering you to win. And we are really passionate about unlocking the unique strengths in entrepreneurs and organizations. So we have a team of strategists and business coaches in Nairobi. If you come to the Sandbox, you'll find us. But we've been able to operate in, I think, 9 countries across Africa now. And we've worked with more than 500 entrepreneurs in Kenya and beyond, and that number is growing. Actually, I am understating, and my team would be very annoyed if they had this. With the Facebook program, we've worked with about 5,000 entrepreneurs to date. So it's 5,500.
Wow.
And during that time, we have just gleaned a lot of experience around what does it take for an entrepreneur to survive or to thrive in Kenya or in the African continent. And that's where I'm here to talk about strategy. One of the key elements of succeeding. In my opinion, this word has been complicated a lot, especially by us consultants. We've made it something very complicated for people to understand that when you now start to mention strategy, you find people already getting bored before you even start the process, because it can be very intensive. However, I'm going to simplify it. And strategy is, in its very simplicity, is how does your organization keep succeeding no matter what happens today, tomorrow, or in the future. Yeah, like if I was to give a very simple definition, strategy is just all about how do we keep succeeding as a company or an organization today, tomorrow, in the future, no matter what is happening around us. And so I have a few tips I've just put together, so I'll not complicate it so that we don't go into a lot of detail. But there are several things that I think after studying strategy and after doing SWOT analysis and all sorts of things, and coming down with targets and goals and strategic initiatives, I'm sure some of you have worked in companies where you've done this. At the end of the day, we filtered it to a few things. One of the things is that strategy is about making payoffs to remain competitive. And I'll mention something that I've seen a lot of Kenyan companies trying to do too much and become everything to everyone. And if you ask me about one of the things that makes Kenyan companies not grow and scale too much, it's because we try and do too many things at the same time and end up not becoming competitive in anything. But if you're keen on coming up with a strategy that will make you extremely competitive and very successful in the space that you're in, then you have to make some payoffs. There are certain things you have to decide that you're going to put aside or not do so that you can focus on others and become better at what it is that you can do. And very closely aligned to that, it's about also identifying unique opportunities, because if you do not identify unique opportunities, you end up running a business that's very difficult to run. Anyone who's in a space where what you're doing is in a sense commoditized, or many other people are offering the same thing, you find yourself in a lot of conversations about negotiations on price. And that's because you find that you have many competitors offering the same thing. So the buyers have many options. And if you don't identify unique opportunities which you build, then you find you're in that commoditized space, and you find that the returns from what it is that you're trying to do end up becoming diminished over time. But when you identify unique opportunities and you build unique capabilities, then you're able to be in a space where you can command a little bit more of a premium on what it is that you are selling and improve your profitability. It is interesting that until today, Apple has decided they're not selling to less than the top 2% of the world. Okay, so they've decided they're going after the people with the money. And despite the fact that Samsung sells a lot more units than Apple does, Apple's profitability is almost 6 times more. So they decided we are going for a unique opportunity. We are going to build products around that unique opportunity, and that's what we are going to do. So again, that closely links to the next thing, which is when it comes to strategy, you have to choose what to say yes to, but more importantly, you have to choose what to say no to. And this is what I find most people struggling to do, especially businesses that have run for a very long time. And there are certain spaces where they're just not competitive anymore, but people are emotionally attached to, we have always done things this way. And so you have people having a very hard time letting go of something that, you know, strategically doesn't make sense anymore. And it keeps draining the company until it gets to a place where, you know, people are not able to remain profitable anymore. And there are plenty of examples of companies that became world leaders, but because they were not keen on what strategic opportunity to choose or to invest in something that was going to keep them competitive, you find them losing their competitiveness over time, and even some of those businesses dying completely. So as a strategy owner in your business, you have to be very keen on what are we going to say yes to and what are we going to say no to. And don't worry, you can ask questions later on and I can clarify some of these things. And then strategy is also about responding to current opportunities and challenges while keeping an eye on the future. And this is something that I also see a lot of my clients struggle with when it comes to strategy. Because we will sit today and look ahead and say in 3 to 5 years, we are going to have more youth than anything else. And then we decide we are going to come up with a strategy on how do we tap to the youth. But by year 2, because of current challenges, you find that the execution of that strategy starts to falter and die. And that's because many times when you're coming up with opportunities that are going to be there in the future, you can't feel the urgency of making those things work now. So it's very easy to fall off executing a strategy because you now start to focus on firefighting, or maybe a current opportunity comes and it draws your eye away from that strategic opportunity that you identified. And in 3 years' time or in 5 years' time, you find that that opportunity you had identified becomes a big thing, but you have not built the capabilities to tap into it. And so you find that your competitiveness goes waning with time. So a strategist has to be a great multitasker. You have to be looking at opportunities around you and finding resources that help you tap into that. But you also have to look at the challenges that are there around you. Like right now, we are all dealing with COVID. But then the third point of that multitasking is that instead of just looking at what's around you now, you also have to be looking at where is our industry headed? Where is the world headed? And what should I be investing in now that in 2 to 3 years will help us to remain competitive? And in line with that, I'll just now talk about things that you need to do internally. One is to make sure that you have a real clear opportunity and value proposition internally. You have to be very clear on exactly what is it that you can be competitive at as a business. Is that opportunity something that is there that you can keep growing and tapping into it into the future? But also, while you identify what that opportunity is or what your value proposition is as a business, the second thing you have to do is to make sure that you're investing in the capacity to deliver on that value proposition competitively today. And a value proposition, very simply, is what is your company uniquely positioned to do very well? What value are you delivering to your clients that is different, that is superior, that is value for money, that nobody else is able to deliver in the same way? But you also now have to make sure that you're building the capacity for tomorrow. So if you're not training your people, if you're not upgrading their skills for the future. A lot of people used to be told you need to invest in digital, and now when COVID came, it forced all of us to do it. But many of us could have been building those skills before. And then you have to make sure that you keep focused on executing your strategy, even when it doesn't feel important. Like I said, fires will always come and feel urgent and important at the time, but you have to make sure that you set aside time every month, every week, to work on those things that you said, these are strategic things you're going to invest in. And so we have to build them up as we go along. But as you do those things internally to build your competitiveness, you have to keep an eye on what is happening externally in your business. So you have to keep an eye on changing social, political, and economic trends that affect your business. So like today, while we are dealing with COVID in 2020, we have to be asking ourselves, in 2021 and 2022, 2022, we are going to have an election, and we know that we always start campaigning 1 year earlier. So what is going to happen? Is the economy going to grow, or will it stagnate up until maybe 2023? So what are we going to start doing today to address some of the challenges that may come with the politicking, whether we have a referendum or they pass it in parliament? And if they pass a new structure of government, how is that likely to affect my business? Are there social things that are happening that will affect my business? If I'm in the education space and government has made a directive that we are going to open in January, how does that affect my business? If politicians come and make certain pronouncements, how is that likely to affect my business? If our economy continues to grow, but COVID is there, holding it down, how do we need to change tact to make sure that our business continues to succeed no matter what? Number two, you have to keep an eye on technology trends affecting your business. So there's always someone doing some research somewhere, some research and development, R&D, and creating a new technology. One interesting one we've been talking about recently is how even professional services are being disrupted, where you find artificial intelligence is sometimes able to deliver better results than human beings. And therefore, a lot of businesses are adopting it. So law firms, accounting firms, HR firms like Grace are adopting a lot of technology and data. So if Grace decides she's going to close her eyes and say, this technology is not going to affect me, in another 4 to 5 years, you'll find if her competitors adopt those technologies and they're able to deliver superior results to hers, then her business begins to suffer at that point. So you always have to be keen. Is there someone developing a technology in my industry that is likely to affect my business, either drive me out of business, or I can adopt it now so that I am competitive in the future? It is interesting to see that taxi drivers, when Uber came, instead of quickly selling the car they have, going and upgrading, and then becoming an Uber driver, they decided to fight them. But you see that technology is not going to go away. So you may try and fight it as much as possible, but you'll only delay the demise of your own business. So technology is not something to ignore. And then you have to keep an eye on industry trends that affect your business in whatever industry you're in. If you're a professional service, are there things happening in your industry that are changing the structures of how people do things? Is there legislation that has been passed that is affecting your industry? Is there someone coming up with a new model of how things are done in your industry that you need to keep an eye on? So you cannot ignore. And all these things, there are so many reports that are released online that always, keep an eye so you can be plugged into or subscribed into different sites or magazines or, that talk about things in your industry. If you're in manufacturing, there are probably a few sites, about the equipment in your industry. You can always see what's the new things that are coming, what are the new trends, what are the new things that people are doing in our industry. And then you always have to be prepared for unforeseen crises because it will always come. Like the one we have now is probably a once in a 100-year occurrence. The last time we had something like COVID was in 1929, just almost 100 years ago. That's when we had the Spanish flu. But there are shorter cycles of crises that happen, especially economic crises happen every 20 to 30 years, where somebody will relax regulation somewhere in the world, and then you'll have an economy crashing somewhere and affecting the rest of the globe. So, like 20 years ago, we had the dot-com bust. About 10 years ago, we had the American crash, and, I think in the 70s, there was an oil crisis. So, you know, there'll always be a stupid human being somewhere who will do something that will affect the rest of the world. And today we are dealing with COVID. So you need to build a business that what I've seen a lot of people do is either have some kind of reserve funds or, you know, have very, there are some companies that put a cap on the kind of risks that they can take so that if a crisis comes, it doesn't catch them off guard too much. And so I think in a nutshell, I have probably looked at strategy, you know, from a broader point of view and from a different point of view than most of you have looked at it. But at the end of the day, it's how can I make sure that my business, no matter what comes, I am able to quickly adjust and adapt to what's happening, but also keep preparing myself for the future. And yeah, so that's it. If you want to learn more about strategy, we actually have a program called Scalarizer that's like a one-day workshop. So I can share my contacts and, you know, we can talk more about that if you're interested. But yeah, I'm now keen on hearing what your questions are and happy to answer them. Okay.
Thank you very much, Joram. I think you have really given us in a nutshell. Lucy Muchemi was asking whether it's possible to share the SME report.
Okay, yes, I can do that. So there's a link to it. You'll allow me to stop sharing just so that I can find it quickly. And then I'll put it in the chat. Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. So Muchemi, there you go. So Nyaroy is asking, during this time of COVID, which has left people financially stretched, how much accommodation should you give in terms of discount in your prices without devaluing your goods or services?
Okay, so I have several things to say about that because we have been doing a lot of work, even with our clients, just around COVID strategy. And I would say there are several things to take into account. So the first one is that there are certain sectors that are extremely badly hit. And the sectors that are very badly hit would not use the same strategy as the ones that are average hit. And we actually have some, believe it or not, we have some sectors that are thriving because of COVID.
Yeah.
So one, it depends on which side of that spectrum you are. If you're in hospitality, if you're in travel, if you're in, you know, something like, you know, ticketing, that where flights are not going anymore, there you have to have a completely different survival strategy where you probably have to look to an alternative skill or an alternative part of that value chain to serve so that you remain in business. But those who are in between, probably working harder and changing strategies. So like say you run a restaurant and your restaurant has been closed down or is closed down at a certain time. Can you adapt to delivery of that food to people's home? I've seen some companies even sending ingredients of how they make their foods, and then they have YouTube videos on how you can cook it so that it, you know, maintains the same taste as how you'd have it in the. So there's a lot of adaptation you can do in the middle. And then if you're serving sectors that are thriving, I have clients in the medical space who are making more money than they've ever made before. In fact, they're looking for financing to deliver PPE equipment and those kinds of things. Yeah. So if you're in that space, then you're probably serving people who have money and you can continue to maintain your prices. So I would say first, look at how you're serving your market. Number two, if you're able to innovatively price such that you can break down your pricing so that people pay you over time, and when their business recovers, they can finish paying. Just make sure that you're not killing your business to serve or deliver the value that you're delivering. Because sometimes you're delivering the same amount of value, sometimes you're delivering more value. And so just understand your client and understand whether they're in distress or not. And you can also particularly tailor a product for COVID times. So if you're doing something online and used to do it as a workshop, in the workshop, you maybe used to pay for hotel, pay for food, you know, pay for drinks and all these sorts of things. Now that you're doing it online, all those overhead costs are gone. So if you reduce the cost of your product, you are likely, I mean, look at how many we are here, 105. okay, participants. Do you know what it would have taken to have 105 people in a hotel? Yeah,
Oh
you
my
guys
God.
would have had to pay a lot of money to attend this. So now you can reduce your cost, but attract a much larger crowd and maybe still make the same amount of money that you made before. So understand your client, understand what goes into your pricing, and tailor it accordingly to how you're adapting your product. I've seen some people, they've ended up even attracting international crowds into their webinars and the like, and making money in dollars. So, or having new clients that they would never have had access to before. So I always say in every crisis, there's also an opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Richard is asking, how do we miss these trends and patterns?
So the challenge with most people while running a business is that we are always focused on the fires and the immediate, what feels, what puts pressure on you immediately. You walk into the office, the accountant walks to you and says, hey, there's a check that must be paid, or this client has refused to serve us anymore, or, this client is complaining. So if you're always spending your time in firefighting and living in today, then you end up missing out on what's happening. Because like I said, there's always someone developing a new technology. There are always trends that are happening. And it's interesting because most of these trends are actually in a sense foreseen. So there was actually a lot of reports saying that we were going to have a recession this year. The only thing they did not foresee is what was going to kick off the recession, which was COVID. But a lot of people were already predicting a recession. So if you had been reading those reports, you'd have started preparing yourself for probably a slowdown in the global economy. So it's about, I try and take out at least an afternoon every week to read and see what's out there. I am subscribed to a lot of I would say blogs or websites that talk about our industry. And you'll find that in every industry, there's always that central blog or that central magazine that is always doing articles. And sometimes I even subscribe and pay for, Fortune magazine, or there's, what's this other one called? So you have Harvard Business Review, that's a bit more expensive. And, so there are always some kinds of publications in your sector, for which it's an investment to actually pay and stay abreast with what's happening. And then beyond that, now you have like economic reports that are always being released by people like Central Bank and, Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. A lot of people don't know that these documents exist and they're free and they're out in the public domain, and you can actually, so it takes time because they're long and boring because it's data and statistics, but it takes time to understand. So like I can tell you, I know in my industry, I deal with a lot of entrepreneurs. The Kenya National Bureau of Statistics did a report some time back and said about 46,000 entrepreneurs in that year sought one professional service or another. That's a very large number. That's the market size for Grace and myself. So why are we not billionaires? Yeah, so data is important and it's always out there.
So Liz is asking, hi Joram, can you share examples on how to say no and how to say yes without compromising your quality as an entrepreneur?
So I can give an example of something we had to do. I mentioned how our company grew from youth development to corporate training to consultancy and then to entrepreneurship development. And at some point, we began to ask ourselves very hard questions around where can we really be competitive? And what came out very clear is that we could not be number one in consultancy because you have your international brands, McKinsey's, PwC's, and everyone playing in that space. And we could not really be number one in the corporate training because there was a lot of people already playing in that space. But when we looked at entrepreneurship development, we had built some unique programs. We had dealt with so many people. We had a lot of data. We had, a lot of people taking interest in us. And until today, we work with a lot of banks, insurance companies, and the like in their SME clubs. So we made a strategic decision to actually cut off doing consultancy for anyone who's not an entrepreneur and to stop doing training, corporate training. We cut off those two divisions. So any clients we had accumulated up until, I meet people until today who are like, imagine we used to have youth programs and kids programs, and they thought that was the best thing that could happen to their children. And until today, they blame me for, for killing those programs. But
Yes.
for us, strategically, we knew that it was stretching us too thin. We were doing almost 1 or 2% for kids, 2% for youth, 2% for, corporate, 2% for consultancy. But now that we decided to go 100% into entrepreneurship development, our company has grown significantly. So the payoff on our side is worth it. And now we are using a different model to partner with other businesses that are in all those other segments. Now at the Sandbox, now we can bring someone who does youth and all sorts of other things, but let them focus on what they're good at, and we focus on what we are good at. So I remember the times when I would tell some clients we are not doing that anymore, and they would be shocked. Some would be angry, some would be very unhappy, but we had to stick to our guns for what we had decided. And you find that it frees you so much to go so much deeper, and you start to see certain things. Like now in entrepreneurship, that's how we ended up coming across that report, and we started asking ourselves, why have we been struggling to get entrepreneurs into our program? And there are thousands and thousands of them in Nairobi looking for this. Where are they? And we started to find where they are. They're in the Chamber of Commerce. They're here, they're there. And we started to become members in all those things. Those are things we didn't have resources to do previously. So there's a sense in which saying no, first of all, cuts away a lot of stress, and then helps you develop depth in one area, and you become so competitive. Like now, I don't know, I tell people we are probably the #1 brand around entrepreneurship development in Kenya. Now we are looking at going into it, across the continent. So the payoff is what is, it's worth it at the end of the day.
And I think what Joram has said, you become so good at what you do, therefore you don't compromise on quality at all. Richard is also asking, how do you separate operational, technical, and strategic activities? And this is key because I face it every day.
So this is something even I am still trying to master. And I have to be very honest, despite how far we've come, I've realized that, there's 3 or so aspects of the business. So there's always a product that you're delivering, and there's building the capacity of how you can deliver that product. Then there's operations behind it. And then as the leader, you also have to be thinking ahead in terms of strategy. So to be very honest, I struggled to manage all those. And then I realized my strength was in strategy and being a visionary, but I'm terrible at project management and operations. So what I do nowadays is that I'm very keen on hiring people who are very complementary, because I know what my weaknesses are. I try and find people who complement my weaknesses. I don't want another strategist in Wild. I want people who are action-oriented, very good at details, and very good at, getting operations done, because I understand how important those things are. So the big thing we've actually been discussing even this year with my co-directors is just the whole issue of capacity. Are we building the right skills in the people that are on board? Are we preparing them for the future? Because we can quickly see the rate at which we are growing. We need the next level that reports to us to step up. And so there are certain skills we need to build very quickly in them, or bring in people who are able to handle things at that level. Because if I don't free myself today, I'll never free my mind to look, because, we are looking at going Pan-Africa. We are looking at building, very superior products and technology. There's a platform we are building internally to be able to enable us to have the data about the people we are serving. So it's about getting strong competencies, first being very clear on what roles do you require internally. If it's technical, get the best technical people you can. If it's operational, get the best operational people. If it's business development, get the best business development people you can get. And then try and make sure that in these recruitments, you're getting people who are also complementary to yourself, so that it frees you. And they always say, don't do something in your business which somebody else can do. So if it's a report and somebody else can do it, don't ever catch yourself doing that report. There's a problem if you ever do. Either you need to increase capacity or someone is not doing their job. If a delivery can be done by somebody else or even outsourced, don't be the one in your car going to pick up that check. Outsource that so that you spend time on more value-adding activities. But this is something that you learn as you go along and you pick up as you go along. And if you're always very honest with yourself in terms of what you can do and what you cannot do, then it becomes a lot easier to make those decisions.
Okay. Sam Corner is asking, what is the distinct difference between strategy and strategic plan, and which should come first?
Yeah. So this is something we always talk about even in the courses that we teach on strategy. So I think the differentiation is that one is probably like an initiative that starts and stops, where you go through a planning process and you end up with like a document that, highlights what it is that you need to do, that has, clear goals, clear responsibilities, and things that need to be done. That's a plan. A plan is when you put it on paper and document that this is what we are going to do. Because that becomes a tool that you can always come back to and say, this is what we said we were going to do. Have we done it or not? If we have done it, is the impact what we had intended it to be? If we have not done it, why have we not done it? Did we need to change strategy, or were we just lazy and somebody didn't do their job somewhere? And let me tell you, the excuses that come up on strategy development are very many, and execution. But the whole concept of strategy, I think, is a state of mind. I think it's where your mind is always alive to the fact that things are changing around you or inside your organization. And for you, I always say strategy is like, it's like a mobile phone. The way the mobile phone always connects to the base station and disconnects and connects to the next one almost automatically. Those signals that are coming from that Safaricom or Airtel base station are things you should be plugged into. You ignore them at your own peril. So I would say strategy is that state of mind where you're always plugged into what's happening around you. You read a newspaper, someone else just sees a story or, about Raila or Ruto or Uhuru. You see what they said, and you realize what they've said is going to kick off something that will affect your business. Maybe they've said they're going to import maize, and you grow maize and you sell maize. So you realize when they import, it's going to flood the market and the prices are going to go down. You start taking action immediately. So a lot of people will just look at what's in the newspapers or in the reports as numbers, as statements, as entertainment, political entertainment. But when you're a strategist, you're able to quickly tell whether something that's happening, the central bank governor comes out and makes a pronouncement, and it's going to affect either the stock market or the banking sector. And you start to, if you're in the space where that's going to affect you, you start to change, either to capitalize on an opportunity or to counter a threat that's going to happen. Yeah. So I would say that's a difference. One is an action of coming up with a plan. The other one is a state of being where you're always strategizing.
Okay. Maureen is seeking clarity on, she says, I thought reserve funds are a requirement by law in Kenya.
It's only regulated in certain industries. For entrepreneurs, it's something that you have to be very deliberate about doing, because in many times, you'll find that the extra money is really not there. And it's really more of a discipline issue. Some of the companies we have successfully helped to put reserve funds, we tell them that, if say they have a 25% profit margin in any deal they do, they can set aside, say, 5% of that 25%. So 20% can go back into, they can even take it out as profits or go back into the operations of a business. But that 5% has to be set aside. So how you can do this is that you can have another account, a reserve account, where you have that money automatically deducted and sent. And then you can invest that money, say, in a money market fund or some kind of, fixed investment where you cannot pull it out easily and use it. And you can even have policies around it where you say that, for the reserve fund to be used, the board has to approve and those kinds of things, so that you in a sense, put what is it, boundaries around yourself dipping into that money, because it's very easy to use money that's seated there extra. But when you have a reserve fund and something like COVID happens, you really thank God that you had something like that.
That's true.
And in times when you don't need it, it's actually an asset that you can use, you know, to leverage and acquire either loans or, you know, investment or that kind of thing, because you're well leveraged. Yeah. So I'm just about to put the link for the report. You can go to our website and download it. I've just put it in the chat.
Okay. James is asking, do you see the need to lobby and influence policy on SMEs and then converting that into a business gain in a win-win conversion? Or do you just adapt to any change in policy and legislation?
Yeah. So the best strategists do two things. They set market trends and they influence legislation. Okay. I'm sure you keep hearing in America about big business and big pharma and big this and big that, who are always, in a sense, lobbying legislators and pushing for certain laws to be passed that are favorable. So right now, the big complaint in America is that the wealthy don't actually pay as much taxes as the poor people. How did we end up in such a scenario? It's because they lobbied to get themselves there. But you can also use your lobbying power for good. Sometimes you have a legislator who just wakes up and decides they can eat some money, some rent seeking through passing a certain law so that it creates a certain license and they can be able to eat from that. Like recently, I think that someone was trying to pass a bill for all IT people to be registered with a certain institution. And if they're not certified by that institution, they cannot be practitioners in IT. But we all know IT people. There are many people who didn't even go to school. They were self-taught and they do a very good job. So that was going to lock out a lot of people from being able to be IT practitioners. And I think you had to pay a 5,000 fee every year. And you can imagine the number of IT people in the country who'd pay that. So someone was pushing it because looking at making some money at the end of the day and having some clout. So in such an instance, if you're in that industry and if you don't speak up and that bill is passed, you end up finding you're on the receiving end. And that's why you find people like KEPSA, Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and these kinds of institutions. So the best lobbying can usually happen through an association. So if there's an industry association for your business, you need to get involved. There's times when legislation can create opportunity, but other times it can create threats. So what you find, in fact, this is very interesting. I'll not mention the company, but I had a friend who was a lobbyist in one of the tobacco companies in Kenya. And they said that they've gotten to a level because they know they are so far ahead of the industry, they'll actually lobby for more laws to be passed that are very stringent because they know their competitors don't have the financial muscle to adapt quickly. So there are people who've used lobbying as a weapon against their competition. There are others who've used it just to, create, like there are certain industries you have to be registered, licensed, and that kind of thing. So it locks out people who have not gone through that kind of process. So definitely you can do it for good, but there are also people who can do it for evil. So I always say build your business to the point where you can get involved in your industry association and even run and make sure you're on the board or something so that you're able to influence a kind of legislations because government does listen to industry associations quite a bit.
Yeah. Lucy, and I'm sure she's speaking for 1,000 others. She says her business is 3 years old. She's not sure she has a strategy. She runs as she goes. How does one create strategies? And I am so sure, so many of us. Yeah. So how does one create strategies?
Okay, so as I mentioned, there are frameworks around it that help you to look at different aspects. So I'm sure you've heard about the SWOT analysis and prioritization. There are matrix tools, and those are more or less complicated things, but you have to be a very good analyst. They help you analyze. So like now, if you're to analyze your company and the industry you're in, and start asking yourself questions like, what would it take for me to become one of the best people in my industry, for example? Like that's one of the most fundamental questions you can ask. If there's a big market and I don't have it, I've not captured it, what is it that I'm lacking? So if you have competitors that say they have superior machines or superior staff, or can I build those things so that I can compete with them? Or if I don't want to go in that direction, is there something unique I can create? And these are experience, I'm just picking like ideas off the top of my head. And I'll keep using you, Grace. Grace is a HR consultant, and there are many other HR consultants in the Institute of Human Resource Management. But Grace can come and say, because there are many people, I've been working with a certain industry and I can see this industry seems to be ignored. So it could be, say, manufacturing sector, and even very specifically manufacturing for textiles. And why has it been ignored? Maybe just nobody has seen it as a very lucrative industry. So it ended up being ignored, and all the HR managers who went there didn't do a good job. So she comes and says, I'm going to create HR practices and policies exactly for the textile sector, because I can see there are 40 companies here and nobody is serving them. So that's a unique opportunity. So sometimes you identify opportunities by working with people where you work with so many companies, but you begin to realize there's a certain industry or certain category of customers. I know somebody who specifically does operations just for the legal sector, because they realized legal firms were very disorganized, and they decided they were going to come and help do policies just for the legal sector. You could be in a certain industry, and every time you try and get a certain product or service, it's always out of stock. So you decide, I'm going to start importing this thing. And then you find, because it was always out of stock for you, it was also out of stock for many other people. So it created a unique opportunity. And then you find that you've become, and a lot of my clients have done that, where it's called backward integration. When they start going back in the value chain, they realize there's a big opportunity behind in becoming a supplier of that particular thing to who are your competitors than continuing to compete with the people who you are with. So ideas can come from anywhere. Sometimes you can combine two things in an industry. Maybe you're an artist and you're a lawyer. And I think my friend June Gashui does this. She's a very good musician, but then she realized artists are always being scammed, and she had studied law. So she went into IP law specifically for creatives and, created her own space. So if you're really perceptive, there's a lot of unique opportunities that you can unearth. And usually when you get that opportunity, it gives you time to run and capture it before other people notice what's happening. So like we started doing entrepreneurship development in 2010. Around the time we were starting, there was hardly anyone else doing training for entrepreneurs. Today, we have more than 9 competitors. But we had such a head start in that space that they're all, in a sense, trying to play catch up with us.
Thank you, Joram. Joram, we have about 10 minutes, so we need to answer the questions very fast. Richard again is asking, how do you approximate that the red strategy has been exhausted, then move to the blue ocean strategy? And before you answer that, Simon Kamau is asking for your contact. We'll share his slide in your emails after this. Okay, so
what was the question again? Just ask
moving
again.
From red. How do you approximate that the red to blue ocean?
So for those who may not know, red ocean, blue ocean is a term someone wrote a book about. Instead of competing in markets that are already saturated, which is what he called red oceans, you could create for yourself an entire new category of business and end up, creating a new space for yourself. And you find that a lot of the, particularly tech businesses that have been built in the last 20 years, that's what they ended up doing, capitalizing on technology. So like Facebook is really a monopoly globally, and created their own blue ocean. How do you know you're in a red ocean? If you're always in a conversation about price with your clients, you're probably in a red ocean. If your clients can easily move from you and find somebody else who supply exactly the same thing that you do, you're probably in a red ocean. If you're finding it difficult every year, you find your margins are going lower and lower, you're probably in a red ocean. So red ocean just means that too many people are now supplying the same thing that we were, and whatever it is that we had that made us unique or gave us a competitive edge has won out by now. So how do you move away from that? I found the best way of moving away from a red ocean be to focus on finding a unique thing that you can do for a certain type of client and doing it in a way that nobody else can. And I tell people you can do that by creating a very unique product or service. You can do it by integrating products and services. What we've done at the Sandbox that has given us a competitive edge is brought a number of consultants around ourselves who are complementary and ended up creating a one-stop shop. That has created a huge barrier for our competitors. You can do it by, building strategic partnerships that are unique towards a certain area. So like say you always deliver, say, tax services, but you realize that a lot of your clients always end up needing a legal service. So as a tax consultant, you can partner with a legal, firm or bring in a lawyer into your firm to handle the legal aspect so that you don't have to keep, referring to somebody else, and you can have it in-house and, maintain the quality standards. So blue oceans can be created by innovating, by combining different competencies within your business model. By building technology, you could be the only one going, digital in a space or industry where everyone else is still dealing manual. So you could use technology to build a competitive edge. The other thing you can do is also be a reseller of a product or a service that's very unique, but that also whoever is bringing it into the market protects your market. That can also create a blue ocean for you. So there are many models you can use to find a competitive edge.
I think Susan Wabero is asking for a lot of business people currently. She said, COVID has really affected the credit policy where clients are not able to pay on time. And in return, this affects the cash flow position. What is the lesser evil, retaining the customer or losing the customer if they will not be able to pay cash?
Wow. It's a bit of a defensive tactic to use to not get into an arrangement that will get you into the red zone. But the challenge is we don't know how long COVID is going to take. So we've been asking a lot of people just to evaluate. First of all, bear in mind that COVID is going to pass. It may take a long time, but it's going to pass. And when it passes, your clients will remember who was there for them and who was not. So you have to balance out that relationship aspect. But do not balance out the relationship to the point where it hurts you and, benefits them. So that's a very tricky balance. And sometimes it means that because somebody has been a very good client of yours, you'll make certain concessions. Maybe what you can do is look internally and look at how can you reduce your costs to the bare minimum. How can you, maybe can you build more volumes, but build a payment model where it's maybe pay as you go or something. But when everyone pays you within a month, even if it's a reduced fee, it's enough to keep you going. So I would say if you're ever in an arrangement where you're feeling pain and the other person is not, something is wrong. If they're feeling pain and you're not, also something is wrong. So it's a time to say, let's balance it out. Let's work together and see how we can do this together. But the other thing is also to look at, can we adopt a different model that is cheaper? I used to come to your office every week. Can we now be meeting on Zoom and you pay less? So how you're delivering has also reduced your prices and you stay in business.
Joram, I'd like you to form now one answer, one sentence, one word answers. Sorry. Lydia is asking, how do you decide this is a unique opportunity?
One, that there's no one else delivering or serving that need the same way you are, and that there's many people who need that thing as is. And many times when you strike a unique opportunity, you'll find that your business just starts to grow, even maybe from word of mouth, or you've not done too much publicity, but you keep getting referrals. It means that there are many people looking for this particular thing. Nobody was offering it, and now you've started offering it. So you find you're just growing and growing and growing without even marketing yourself very much. But you can just look around, do your research online and that kind of thing to see, is there anyone else who's doing something like this in this nature? And you find nobody, and you find you're the only one who's doing it at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Karen is saying she'll sign up for your class.
Okay.
And Simon Washira, your friend, is asking, there are people who argue that strategy, like other grandiose terms like scenario planning, are just jargons that business borrowed from the military.
Yeah.
And that businesses should be as fluid as possible so that they are not locked by a plan in a fast changing terrain. What is your take?
So what's been happening is that if you looked 10 or 20 years ago, you could plan a bit longer term than what you can do today. And that's because a lot of things didn't change very fast. But with the advent of, first of all, computers and then the internet, things have started changing very fast. And so and then the macro force is globalization. So you find that there are many forces nowadays you're always dealing with that are changing so rapidly. So you'd find that there are times you could do a 10-year plan and implement it and it works out as is. Then that period came down to 5 years. Then it came down to 3 years. And nowadays, even if you do a 3-year plan, you find that you still have to stay on top of it and keep evaluating a lot of the things to see that they're not changing. Because nowadays, in the span of a year, you can have a new player in your industry and they come and wipe you out completely. So I would say that the need for strategy is still there. It's not gone away. It's just that you'll hear terms like agile. Nowadays, you need to be very adaptable and agile. There's also a term called VUCA or something. So, but all this just contributes to the fact that the forces that you have to keep in mind are more, and they change very rapidly. So you have to be a lot more adaptable and make sure that nothing comes and takes you by surprise. But the need for strategy is still there. And technically, there are some things which will not be quite disruptive. There are some very long-term trends, trends that happen over 10 years, some over 20 years. So like today, you'll hear about a term called artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is not yet ready enough to be very disruptive for many industries, but in the next 5 years it will. And come what may, that trend will happen. You hear things like augmented reality. So those are things that you just keep close and you keep looking at them. If it turns out to be nothing big, at least you had it, you had prepared for it. If it turns out to be big, at least you have something to respond to it immediately. But do not ignore trends. Ignore them at your peril, is what I can say.
Okay, yeah. We'll take one more question, or probably two, because this one I think is important. Alex is asking, how does one make the decision to specialize in some areas and leave out some? How does one manage the process given the obvious beating, in quotes, the business takes given the loss in revenue expected?
I think you kind of have to have an internal philosophy of what's important to you or not. And that philosophy has to guide the kind of decisions you make. So if integrity is important for you, excellence is important for you, if the customer is important for you, you have to have certain things that are guiding what you consider important as a business. I have to say, sometimes going through a strategic process is painful. I was very passionate about the children's programs we used to do. Even my kids used to come, and until today, they ask me, why are we not having that program? I could decide for the sake of my children to put it back, but it's a very unprofitable thing. So I guess you have to be guided by your values. You have to be guided by things you're passionate about. But at the end of the day, you also have to be guided by what makes business sense. And those are payoffs you'll have to, make all the time. But I found that if you're very principle-based or values-based, it becomes a bit easier to make that particular decision. So I think start by deciding what's very, very, very important to you, but does it also make business sense? That brings me to another point. You always have to have people who check your sanity as far as your business is concerned. They can be a board, they can be friends, or peers who you're able to be very honest with and share very openly about what's going on. Because sometimes we can get into our own delusions and think that we are onto something, yet we are headed completely down the wrong path. And that's why you find people either put a board of advisors or directors in place, or have a system internally that forces them to look at things objectively rather than subjectively. And in any organization where you have one person who's too powerful, especially the founder, and nobody who can check them, many times those stories end up in disaster. And you've seen a few of them in Kenya.
Excellent, excellent. Someone was asking about the challenges of implementing a strategy. Please, 3 points only.
What's
challenges of implementing a strategy.
Yeah, I would say one is just remaining focused on it and saying that, we'll be reviewing it once a month and making sure that we are executing. In fact, amongst my clients, the ones who grow fastest from the ones who don't, the difference is simply execution. So those who remain very focused on executing the things that they talked about or reviewing, then you find they're always making the changes that make them adaptable as they go along. Those who get tired, bored, or are not disciplined enough to keep implementing, you find that the difference, in fact, becomes very big over years. I have clients who've grown into billion, shilling, revenues, and others who remained at the below 100, but it's because some executed and some did not. Number two is knowing when a trend you identified has significantly shifted or not. Because we can say today that by 2022, we are projecting that counties will have grown to X, so let's invest in counties. But then somewhere in between, COVID happens and government reduces budgets to counties. How do we know that that trend has changed and we need to shift strategy and maybe not invest in counties anymore, but go virtual or something of a sort? So I think also knowing when to change or when not to. The other one is probably to see a disruptive force coming because those happen very quickly, and nowadays they take down even the largest organizations. So reacting very quickly to a disruptive force. In Kenya, I think one company that reacted very well to Uber is Piwin Motors. Yeah, I just look at those guys and I'm like, these guys had strategy in place because they moved into first of all, they brought in an investor and then set one group that has the same rights. I think they adopted similar technology to Uber, but internal now amongst their fleet. And I've seen that they actually have now a unit that's selling cars. So what they probably decided is that they need to move into a different value chain than the one that was more taxi oriented. And so there are some companies that you see change strategy very quickly and they're able to adapt and keep on moving. Because even as Ubers come, there are certain things Ubers cannot do that taxis or private transport can still do.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Joram. It's already 9 p.m. We're already past our time. I think we have really learned a lot. Thank you very much for your wisdom and your willingness to share your knowledge. He has shared his latest report, and we're going to attach it to the presentation after in the emails we send to the audience. So thank you very much, Joram, for being who you are and for sharing. And I think we are going to have you again because we couldn't exhaust the questions.
Yes.
So I think you'll come and share your journey in entrepreneurship.
Yes, I need to tell my story in entrepreneurship. That one is interesting and funny.
Excellent. Yeah. So thank you very much, you and the Wild family, and we shall see you in the Skillerizer class.
Yes.
Thank you, Zalego Academy. Asante sana. Zalego Academy, thank you very much. Our IT partners. Thank you, NG Support Services, our communications and brand management partner. Thank you, Voice Development for Effective Speaking, for working with us over the last week and our speaking skills. We are also learning. Thank you very much for the offer. Do not forget to tune in to Pearl Radio 96.9 FM. By the way, Joram, have you heard of that one?
I'm hearing about it, but that's what marketing is all about.
Yes. So 96.9 FM in Nairobi. Thank you very much, our audience, for always being loyal and true and for tuning in. we shall send his presentation and any other information that you may want. You can get in touch with us. Kindly like our Facebook page, follow us on Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel. All of them go under the name Atara Solutions, ATARAH Solutions. I have been your host, Grace Nzula. See you next week, same time, same place. We shall be discussing intellectual property. Oh my Lord. Thank you very much. And from all of us, it's good night.